The air above Zama trembled with dust and memory. The African sun hung low, baking the plain where two empires would decide the future. For 17 years, Hannibal had been Rome's nightmare. The ghost that crossed mountains, burned villages, and broke armies. But now, in 202 BCE, the hunter stood still. His elephants waited in restless silence, their shadows long across the sand. The veterans behind him, the last survivors of Cannae and Trasimene, tightened their grips on spears slick with sweat. There was no glory here, no fanfare, no drums, just wind, dust, and inevitability. Hannibal's eyes, lined with years of exile and war, searched the horizon. Beyond the shimmer of heat, Roman formations advanced, precise, patient, unyielding. He understood before it began. This battle was not about survival. It was about reckoning. For the first time in his life, Hannibal Barca was the one being hunted. Across the plain, Scipio Africanus watched the horizon with the calm of a man who had already seen hell. He had been there at Cannae, a boy who watched Rome's legions die around him and lived to remember every scream. From that ruin, he had learned not despair, but adaptation. Now he returned as its answer. His armor shone not with vanity, but conviction. Every plate mirrored the discipline that built an empire. Around him, the legions moved with quiet precision, the rhythm of a civilization remade by loss. Scipio was not born from victory. He was forged by catastrophe. He carried Rome's ghosts on his shoulders, but his gaze was fixed forward toward the man who had made them. To defeat Hannibal was not enough. He would erase the myth itself, the belief that Rome could ever be prey again. History still shuddered beneath Hannibal's footsteps. Long before Zama's dust, there had been the Alps, a mountain wall turned into a graveyard of men and beasts. Elephants climbed through snowstorms, soldiers froze where they stood, and yet he emerged, like a god carved from endurance. Then Cannae, a circle of slaughter that devoured 50,000 Romans in a single day. Fields soaked red, vultures thick as clouds, the name Hannibal whispered in terror through every Roman household. He marched across Italy undefeated, a shadow that outlasted armies. But time, not tactics, turned against him. His allies fractured, his supplies thinned. Rome learned. The victories that had made him immortal now chained him to a memory too heavy to carry. Every triumph had led here, to a dry plain where the ghosts of snow and blood followed him still. The hunter had run out of road. Zama was more than a battle. It was a reckoning between worlds. On one side stood Hannibal, the old master of strategy, his armor dulled, his eyes still burning with the fire of Carthage's last hope. On the other, Scipio, young, calm, visionary, the embodiment of Rome's new age. Between them stretched a plain littered with fate. The elephants trumpeted, the Roman horns answered, and the wind carried both challenge and prophecy. Hannibal fought for memory, for a world of honor and vengeance, of courage carved in bronze. Scipio fought for something colder, sharper, system, innovation, destiny. When they finally met, neither bowed. They understood. One would build the future, the other would haunt it. Africa itself seemed to hold its breath. For in that moment, cunning faced courage, and the old world began to crumble beneath the sandals of the new. Cannae, 216 BCE. The name still chilled Roman blood. 50,000 soldiers slaughtered in a single day, their legions swallowed by Hannibal's genius. His double envelopment became legend, the perfect trap, the perfect massacre. But where others might have broken, Rome endured. Defeat became doctrine. They studied their destroyer, memorized his art, dissected his chaos until it became their order. From the ashes of that field rose a single survivor who refused to forget. Scipio, the boy who had seen the eagle standards fall. He understood what the Senate could not. Rome could not outmatch Hannibal's brilliance, only outlast it. Over the years, he rebuilt the legions in the image of their enemy. Flexible, patient, ruthless, Zama would not be a rematch. It would be Rome's reckoning, fought not to erase Cannae, but to become what it feared most, the empire that learned from defeat. In 204 BCE, the impossible happened. Rome invaded Africa. Scipio's fleet cut through the dawn haze, ships black against the golden sea. Soldiers disembarked in silence, boots pressing new history into Carthaginian soil. For decades, Hannibal had brought war to Rome's doorstep. Now the favor was returned. Carthage panicked, summoning its exiled hero home. Hannibal crossed the sea to defend what remained of his city. Older, thinner, haunted by years of politics and exile. Scipio prepared to meet him by mastering his greatest weapon, fear. He drilled his men to face elephants, opening lanes, blasting trumpets, turning chaos into choreography. And beside him rode Massinissa, the Numidian prince whose cavalry had once eluded Rome, now their ally, their edge. Africa was no longer Hannibal's stage. The student had come to the teacher's home ground, carrying not imitation, but evolution. Before the blood came the silence. On the plains of Zama, two riders approached beneath the same wind, Scipio and Hannibal, legends bound by fate. They dismounted, unarmed, the air between them heavy with memory. Hannibal's face bore the lines of 17 years of war. Scipio's eyes reflected the youth that war had stolen. They spoke not of hatred, but of inevitability. Hannibal warned him that victory breeds ruin, that Rome's triumph would sow its own decay. Scipio listened, calm, unyielding. "If the gods will decide justice," Hannibal said at last, "then let them judge through arms." They mounted again, and the distance grew. Two destinies diverging under the same sun. Neither sought glory. Each sought an ending. By dusk, words would give way to what both men truly understood. The language of war. Drums thundered. The ground itself seemed to breathe. Hannibal unleashed his elephants, towers of flesh and iron surging forward, the sky splitting with their cries. But the Roman lines did not waver. Trumpets answered, high, sharp, cutting through the chaos. The legions parted into lanes, opening pathways through death. The elephants, blinded and panicked, tore through their own ranks, crushing mercenaries underfoot. Dust swallowed the horizon. Sound became vibration. Time collapsed into instinct. Amid the confusion, Scipio stood unmoved, eyes fixed on the battlefield like a mathematician studying the motion of chaos. What had once been Rome's terror was now its test, and Rome passed. Where panic once ruled, the chroniclers would write, discipline now reigned. The beasts that had once symbolized Carthage's power became its undoing. In the space of a heartbeat, fear changed sides. Then came the grind. The earth shook beneath the clash of shields. Hannibal's army advanced in 3 waves. Mercenaries first, then Carthaginians, then the scarred veterans of Italy, the ghosts of Cannae themselves. Scipio's triplex aces, Hastati, Principes, Triarii, answered in perfect rhythm. Pila arced through the air, slicing dust and daylight. Swords found gaps, shields splintered. Men fell into the spaces they'd trained to fill. There was no spectacle, only endurance. Muscle against will, memory against memory. The veterans pressed forward, shouting in Punic, their voices breaking through the din. Cannae! Cannae! But Scipio's legions didn't flinch. Every thrust, every step forward was an answer. Not again. On that field, revenge wasn't shouted. It was measured, calculated, earned in inches. For a moment, it felt like history repeating. Hannibal's veterans pushed the Roman centre back, their spears glinting with cruel familiarity. The formation wavered. A murmur of dread rippled through the ranks, the ghost of Cannae whispering in every soldier's ear. Then, dust on the horizon. At first just a shimmer, then the distant thunder of hooves. Massinissa and Laelius had returned, leading the Numidian and Roman cavalry around Hannibal's flank. The sound swelled, a heartbeat becoming a storm. Hannibal turned, eyes wide. His own masterpiece, encirclement, now bore down upon him. Scipio raised his hand. The horn sounded. The circle closed. The past had come for its creator. The trap was perfect. The cavalry crashed into Hannibal's rear, sealing his army in iron and dust. Screams folded into the roar of victory and despair. From above, the battlefield looked like Cannae, the same deadly symmetry, only reversed. Rome had become the teacher's reflection. Hannibal watched as his line dissolved, the veterans swallowed by the same tactic that had once made him immortal. There was no fury in his eyes now, only comprehension. The genius of Cannae had turned inward, consuming its maker. When the dust settled, Scipio stood amid the ruin, the boy who had survived the nightmare, now its architect. The field fell silent. Rome did not cheer. It exhaled. Zama was not triumph. It was inheritance. Hannibal had made Scipio, and Scipio had ended Hannibal. History, for once, had closed its own circle. Smoke drifted low over the plain. The cries had quieted to whispers, the thunder of war replaced by the sound of crows. Amid the ruins stood Hannibal, no longer the terror of Rome, but a man out of time. His army was gone, his elephants silent, his banner swallowed by dust. Yet he did not rage or flee. He watched. Each fallen soldier was a reflection of a world he had carried too long on his shoulders. He had survived every enemy but the one no general could outmaneuver: time itself. The Romans had beaten him, not through strength, but through memory. They had learned his art, refined it, and turned it back upon him. Hannibal dropped his sword, its tip sinking into the sand. For Carthage, the age of heroes ended here. For Rome, a new kind of empire began, built on the brilliance of the man they destroyed. Carthage bent its knee. The once proud city surrendered its fleet, its treasury, its future. Scipio dictated peace with the same calm that had carried him through battle, disarmament, tribute, silence. He returned to Rome triumphant, hailed as Africanus, savior of the Republic. Crowds chanted his name, gold spilled through the streets. But amid the celebration, the legions marched without joy. The veterans of Zama knew what the Senate did not, that victory had cost something irretrievable. In the forum, Scipio stood before the Curia, offered power, and refused. He folded his cloak, bowed his head, and walked away. Rome called it humility. History would call it foresight. For though he had won, he understood what his nation had become: too strong to stop, too proud to rest. The Republic had survived Hannibal, but it had not survived itself. The years that followed were quiet, but not kind. Hannibal, hunted and exiled, wandered from court to court, his brilliance feared even in defeat. He would die far from home, staring into the same sea he once crossed with elephants, the horizon reflecting everything he'd lost. Scipio, too, withdrew, honored yet isolated, his name revered but his counsel ignored. He walked his gardens in silence, the weight of destiny pressing heavier than any armor. Two men who had shaped an age, now ghosts within it, their victories, their losses, their lessons, all blurred by the march of empire. Genius and legacy rarely share the same house. Hannibal taught the world strategy, Scipio taught it restraint. Both were forgotten by the nations that owed them everything. After Zama, no enemy could challenge Rome. The Mediterranean became a Roman lake, its maps turned crimson. Carthage was crippled, her walls dismantled, her spirit broken. But Rome did not rest. Victory had revealed a hunger too vast to contain. Provinces became trophies. Wars became habit. Fear, once Rome's great teacher, was gone, replaced by certainty. The Republic began to wear the mask of empire. Scipio had refused the crown, but others would not. In his lifetime, Rome still pretended restraint. After him, it would forget the word entirely. The Senate grew rich, generals grew bolder, and the legions, once tools of defense, became instruments of destiny. The Republic became an empire in everything but name, the chroniclers wrote. What Hannibal could not conquer, Rome's ambition consumed. Hannibal's body died in exile, but his name refused to. Long after his city was ash and salt, his ideas marched on. Centuries later, soldiers still studied his battles: Napoleon, Clausewitz, Patton, men born millennia apart, united by a single ghost. They traced his maneuvers, his deception, his audacity, and saw themselves. To lose and still teach is its own kind of immortality. Carthage vanished from maps, yet Hannibal's shadow endured, a warning and an inspiration. His genius became the blueprint for those who would one day surpass him, even as his fall became the prophecy they ignored. In the ruins of history, few names burn brighter than the one that could not be erased. Hannibal Barca, the man who taught his conquerors how to conquer. Zama was more than victory, it was inheritance. Rome regained her pride, but lost her restraint. Hannibal lost a war, but Scipio lost something deeper: the clarity that comes from struggle. With Carthage broken, there were no more equals, no more lessons, no more limits. The Republic's discipline gave way to appetite. Zama was the wound that never healed, a triumph so total it left Rome directionless. Each new campaign was not defense, but repetition. The world had become Rome's battlefield, and peace became unthinkable. Hannibal's defeat ended Carthage. Scipio's victory ended balance. It was the day Rome learned how to win and forgot how to stop. The wind rose again over the African plain. Two standards faced each other, just as they had at dawn. Now only one remained. The Carthaginian emblem lay half buried in the dust, its cloth frayed, its symbol fading beneath sand. The Roman eagle stood unmoving, its wings catching the last light of day. The desert was silent. No triumph, no mourning, only the echo of inevitability. Narration. At Zama, Rome avenged Cannae, but lost its fear, and an empire that no longer fears begins to rule. The camera drifts upward, the battlefield shrinking into abstraction, one scar among many soon to come. For Hannibal, it was the end of an age. For Scipio, the beginning of something colder. Empires do not rise on victory alone, they rise when fear finally dies. And on that plain, under the African sun, fear breathed its last, and Rome began to rule the world.